Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Joining us in just a minute is Pistons beat writer Rod Beard from the Detroit News. First, a few news and notes to get us started. It's early June, and it's usually a very quiet time in the Michigan athletic scene. Summer workouts are underway for football, and it's a big recruiting month, the biggest of the year. But it's anything but business as usual on the Wolverine athletic scene. Stay tuned is what John Beilein told us a couple of weeks ago when asked about his contract extension, and we've been waiting to see what would happen. Well, what's happened is the Detroit Pistons are now in the picture. And while they have reportedly not offered the job to Coach B, it appears they are very serious about him, and the feelings appear to be mutual. As Coach B said a few weeks ago, stay tuned. Up next is Pistons beat writer Rod Beard from the Detroit News, here on the Michigan Man, on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. With us on our Game Days segment today is a gentleman who used to have the Michigan beat just a few years ago and who now covers the Detroit Pistons for the Detroit News, Rod Beard. Rod, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. It's my worlds colliding now that I get to talk about Michigan basketball again on a Pistons context.
Indeed it is. Well, as we all know, by now on Friday, the news broke that the Pistons were more than a little bit interested in Coach John Beilein. When do you think this all started to come together, Rod?
I think it's right after Stan Van Gundy got fired at the beginning of May that they cast a very wide net, and their plan was to go out and to find a disparate group of coaching candidates, the best college coach they could find in Beilein, maybe the best rising assistant in former Michigan standout Juwan Howard, and best broadcaster. They looked at every possible configuration of a head coach in different areas, and just wanted to bring those guys in. And I applaud the Pistons for thinking out of the box and not just saying, hey, let's find the best NBA retread or coach there who is available and try to figure out if we can get him to come in for an interview. They really did their due diligence in trying to find the best candidates from all over the landscape and bringing those guys in.
Well, Monday night in the Detroit News, you reported that according to ESPN, the Pistons are interested in continued discussions with former Toronto coach Dwayne Casey and Coach Beilein. Does that mean then that the Pistons have narrowed their choices to those two?
It feels like it, and Ime Udoka from the San Antonio Spurs, an assistant coach there, seems like to be the third finalist that's there. I don't know if they're going to cast that net very much wider than that. And Beilein is the one that is very intriguing because he's had some overtures with NBA teams before and has said no in the past, but it's the way that this one is starting to develop that he has some interest in it, is at least interviewing and flying out to L.A., to meet with Pistons owner Tom Gores is very intriguing in the timing of it, coming off a national title game appearance, and everything else is just really, really intriguing how this is unfolding.
Is that meeting with Tom Gores taking place this week that we know of?
Well, I think one already happened last week, and then the follow-up, I would assume is happening at some point this week. I'm hearing that they're nearing the end of this process and really trying to narrow down. If they've gotten down to three finalists, as has been reported, then it looks like they could really start to pull this thing together in the next few days or maybe even the next week or so. And the timing is critical because you've got the NBA draft coming up on June 21st, and you got Summer League after that. So you want to start getting some of these things in place so you know what philosophy you're drafting a position for, what type of guys, what type of culture you want to have here. And the longer that this goes on and you're trying to figure out what that's going to be, because again, the Pistons are looking not just for a head coach, but they're trying to stock their entire front office with a general manager, with some other front office staff. They may bring back some of the current existing assistant general managers, but you want to kind of figure out how everything falls into place and who's going to be in what position so that you can start establishing a direction.
So at this point, the process is ongoing. As you said, the Pistons would probably like to wrap it up relatively quickly. So really, there has not been an offer made that you know of yet?
No, not that I know of. That I don't think there's been an offer made. But again, it's just having these next round of interviews and trying to figure out the nuance between each of the candidates and things that they like and what one candidate might have it as an advantage over another one. I think that's where they are now. And then you get down into details with numbers and salary requirements and things like that you can figure out. That probably wouldn't take as long. I think they have a general idea of what those things would be. But it's just coaching philosophy. And Dwayne Casey, having coached in the NBA for a number of years, may have a little bit of an advantage there in dealing with an NBA locker room and some of the personalities. But from what I gather, John Beilein could be just as flexible, just as adjustable. And we've seen that with the player development that he's done and with the way that he's dealt with some different personalities in his program at Michigan.
Well, I think what's most shocking to Michigan fans is Coach B has said to, pretty much anyone that would listen the last couple of years that he wanted to stay at Michigan, retire at Michigan, no plans to go anywhere else. So all of a sudden, here he is at age 65, granted coming off an appearance in the national championship game and seemingly having the program just about where he wants it. And you think to yourself, why the NBA? Why now?
Well, there are a bunch of theories out there, and I think I can shoot one down that Tom Gorris, being a Michigan State alum, is trying to pull Beilein in order to stoke the rivalry a little bit more. I've heard that one as a conspiracy theory. I don't think that's the case. I think he's just looking for the best coach possible. And maybe in Beilein's case, this is another suggestion that was made to me, that maybe he's nearing the end of his coaching career, and he's figuring out, hey, here's the NBA is a challenge that I've never even touched. I've never even gotten to that point where I could interview and I could find the right job. And timing is everything in these things. Maybe 4 years ago when he was looking at the NBA, it just wasn't the right time for him. There were other things that he wanted to do, or he wasn't ready to make that jump. At 65 now, he could be, if he is in the twilight of his coaching career, that he could say, hey, this is the last hurrah. This is the only shot that I'm going to have left at making that jump to the NBA. And what someone told me, Dan Dockich, said that coaches live for that. You're down by, or you're up by 1 point and you're facing LeBron James. How do you structure a defense that's going to stop him? Or you're down by one. What offensive play do you draw up? That's what coaches kind of live for. That's in their DNA and in their blood, to be able to do those sorts of things and see if those things are going to work. And so I don't know if John wants to live with regret and the road not taken in taking that opportunity to look at the NBA, but there are so many theories about why now, why would he care about the Pistons? This isn't necessarily an elite level job. It's not like you're taking on the Warriors or the Celtics or a team that's really right there ready to win an NBA championship. And maybe in Beilein's case, he's not looking for an NBA championship. He's just looking at the challenge of being able to coach at that highest level and if he can succeed there.
One of the theories that you read also, Rod, I've seen this in some of the national slants, is that it's about money, which to me is hard to believe because I think he's pretty much got all the money he needs. So if this happens, it is definitely, it's more than money, isn't it?
Oh, no. In the years that I've known John Beilein, he's a man of character, and that would just be a negotiating stunt. I don't think he'd fly out. As much travel as he does for recruiting and everything else, I don't think he'd take a trip out to L.A. if this were about money. And we're talking about Michigan here. In the Michigan Athletic Department, they could look under their mattresses and find, if the number is $5 million a year that he wants, they could find $5 million. It's not a ploy. It's not a money grab for him. I think it really is something that's itching for him, and the curiosity of seeing that whether he can succeed at the NBA level. I really think that's what's at the heart of this thing. And if you intersect those two theories together, that maybe he's not going to coach for 10 more years. Maybe that number is 5, maybe it's 4, and this could be his last contract and his last opportunity to do that. I think that makes a little bit more sense than anything else, and certainly not the money. If this were a smaller school and he were trying to do a money grab there, that would have some credence to it. But we're talking about Michigan, and if he said he wanted $5 million a year, Ward Manuel would go and find $5 million a year to make that happen for him. I just don't buy into that negotiating ploy and leverage issue. I just don't think that's it.
Well, in the last few days since this story broke, we have not really heard a peep from anyone in Ann Arbor. Do you think this whole thing caught Athletic Director Ward Manuel by surprise?
Yeah, I've talked to some people in the program, and they've said, this really caught them by surprise because they were not prepared for it. And again, everything they were thinking of was Beilein renegotiating his contract and everything taking a different tenor of, hey, we're coming off an appearance in a championship game. They've got another recruiting class that they're very proud of and very optimistic about. And they were looking in that direction. And to hear that he was interested in the Pistons, or even more, the Pistons were interested in him, and there was mutual interest there, caught everybody off guard. They were just really shocked about how this was going to turn out. And some former players, the same sort of deal is they don't know if he's as serious, or he's been as serious as he is right now. If he's going and taking interviews, again, the character of John Beilein says that he's not going to waste time. He's not going to waste a trip and waste the conversation time in pursuing something that he's not genuinely interested in. And if we've gotten this far where he is now potentially a finalist for this Pistons job, then he's really, really interested. He's figured out what his weaknesses are and what things might not work for him. He's calculating in that way that he would figure out what the downside of this thing is and figure out a way around it. So again, he wouldn't go through this exercise if he weren't genuinely interested and figured out ways that this can work out for him in a positive.
Well, as we said, Ward Manuel has not said much since Friday, since the story broke. One has to assume he has talked to John Beilein in the last couple of days, and you've got to think a big offer is either on the table or it's going to be made soon. As you alluded to, we've heard in the last 2 weeks that there was a contract negotiation ongoing, extension. I don't know if Ward waits until after the Pistons offer. Do you think that's the kind of thing you have to jump in before the Pistons make that offer?
Well, I think you would have to jump in before and at least say, hey, we want you. We're caught off guard by this, but we're certainly going to do whatever it takes. And on the very off chance that money is the issue, you let John Beilein know that you covet him, you appreciate all that he's done, and you want him to move forward, being the head coach for as long as he wants to. And that's the other piece of this. There's no push for John Beilein to leave Michigan. All of this seems to be on his own volition, that it's not that his contract is up, or it's not that he's getting pressure from alums, or there's anything going on in the program that he wouldn't want to be around. Everything is probably the best that it could be at Michigan in terms of recruiting, coming off a championship game appearance. Everything is set that Beilein could finish his career very easily at Michigan and not have any regrets, except for maybe not pursuing the NBA, and that might be the one thing that has him dipping his toe in the water here.
Well, as we mentioned, he has a top 10 recruiting class coming in. Jalen Wilson was a huge commit last week for the class of 2019. Beilein said over the weekend he would be talking to his recruits at some point this week. I think he was in Colorado Springs over the weekend. And I've got to think he's either going to reassure them he is staying, or, knowing him, be very upfront with them about his intentions. Wouldn't you think so, Rod?
Yeah, and again, that goes to his character, is that he's not going to tiptoe around the issue and lead the recruits on. He's going to let them know, hey, I'm really looking at this. And again, it's about what his wishes are. And this is an opportunity. And certainly he's earned that ability, that if he wants to leave, that Michigan fans might be a little bit upset by it, but certainly he's earned that right to do whatever in his heart that he really wants to do. And I think he'll let the recruits know that and even the current players, hey, this is something I'm considering. This might be the only opportunity that I have to do this for the rest of my career. And if he stays, if he turns this offer down and he doesn't go to the Pistons, I think he stays at Michigan for the rest of it, as long as he wants to, and he's paid handsomely for it, and everybody lives happily ever after. If not, then again, he went with his heart. He went with the curiosity factor and tried to figure out the best scenario for him and his family and everything else.
Well, those of us that are a bit older remember another local coach leaving his program to coach the Pistons, and I'm talking about Dick Vitale leaving U of D.
Absolutely.
When he had that program ramped up. He wanted to try the NBA, and we know how that turned out. There have been plenty of other big names since then, very successful college coaches, Rod. We all know make that jump and the results they're very sketchy, aren't they?
Yeah, it just doesn't always translate that there's a lot more than just drawing up plays, and certainly John Beilein is highly regarded for his ability to draw up plays and then to develop players. And from a Piston standpoint, those are the two biggest needs of what they have with their roster. They feel like they're playoff ready, and John Beilein can elevate them to that next level that they want to get to. But it is sketchy. You can look at Rick Pitino. You can look at P.J. Carlissimo. There are a number of guys who have tried it. Brad Stevens more recently has had some success in moving from not just a college team, but a mid-major and having some success in Boston. Billy Donovan going from Florida to Oklahoma City, and it took a little bit, but he's had some success there too. You've got to believe, again, the way that John Beilein's mind works, that anything that he thinks wouldn't work, he's figured out a way around it. So whether that would be other assistants who can fill in some of the gaps where he has deficiencies, he's tried to figure out a way that this can work out for him. And again, where has he failed in his career? Once he started out even at a community college level, at Erie Community College, worked his way up through Richmond and West Virginia, he hasn't failed at any of his stops. And I think that's because of the way that he looks at opportunities and weighs the pros and the cons and figures out, hey, if this isn't going to work, or I think this is too big a risk, then I'm not going to do it. So again, I think he's looked at all of this and all of the variables and figured out a way that this can work for him. And he's changed so much over the past 5 years or so since he's been at Michigan. And it's not the my way or the highway mentality. It's more so, how do I use the talent that I have and how do I make these guys work and work with them in such a way that everyone gets their best and we get the best impact out of it.
Well, it's been one heck of a ride for Michigan basketball the last 11 years. Rod, you were there covering it a few of those years, and I think most of us thought as long as Coach B was there, that was going to continue. Would losing him at this point be catastrophic in the short term for Michigan basketball?
I think in the short term, it depends on the attrition that comes from those recruits and the current players that are there too. If they decide to go in a lot of different directions and scatter like the wind, then they're going to have to figure out a way to pull this thing together. And again, it's who succeeds him also, I think, that's going to make a difference. You'd have to put somewhere near the top of that list LaVall Jordan, who has moved on to Milwaukee and now at Butler. You'd have to put him somewhere near the top of that list. And Michigan would be a prime job for nationally any coach to try to pursue. And you'd have to make a really good fit and a good hire to maintain the trajectory that the Wolverines are on right now. So I think that's the next level of all of this. But Michigan fans, at least for right now, just want to keep Beilein at all costs, whether financial or whether any other way that they can make sure that he stays.
Well, that leads into my final question for you, Rod. You covered Coach B for years before you jumped onto the Pistons beat. What does your gut tell you about how this is going to end? My
gut says that the Pistons come out and just hire Dwayne Casey, that he has the NBA experience, and having coached the Raptors and being voted Coach of the Year by his peers, that level of experience and not having to worry about whether Beilein can make that jump, I think that's the way that it ends up. And that Beilein goes back to Michigan. Very, very happy. He gets compensated handsomely, and there's no real issue. I just don't know that they make that big a gamble. And it's not because of X's and O's or anything else, but Dwayne Casey is the safe pick, and I think they go with that safe pick when it's all said and done. Well, I think a lot of Michigan fans would like to think that's how it's going to go down. We should, as we've said, find out relatively quickly because the Pistons want this process to move on. So our guest today on the show, of course, talking about the hot topic around here these days, is Coach B staying or is he leaving for the Pistons? Is Pistons beat writer Rod Beard from the Detroit News, who also covered Michigan for many years. It was great to have you back on the show, Rod, and we thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. Quick Hits is next as we wrap it up for another week here on The Michigan Man on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. On Quick Hits today, we'll know later this week or early next week if Coach B is going to the Pistons or staying put here in Ann Arbor. We'll have more on this story as it develops. Next week, I'll have a June Michigan Man Extra for you. It will air on Thursday or Friday,
and I'll give you a heads up on Facebook and Twitter when it publishes. Our next regular show will be on June 27th. We'll have our monthly recruiting update with Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. We are waiting until the 27th because the weekend prior to that is the biggest recruiting weekend of the year. So we could add some big names to what is already a very good 2019 class. Don't forget you can get our free show app from the Google Play and iTunes stores. You can also hear us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you get the show from iTunes, take an extra minute to rate or comment on the program. We thank you in advance. Thanks again to Pistons beat writer Rod Beard for joining us today with his insight into what's happening with Coach B. We all hope he'll stay, but as Rod said, he's 65, he's been successful everywhere he's been, but he's never been in the NBA, and this offer, if there is an offer, might be hard to pass up. We'll know soon. Have a great Wolverine week, everyone. We'll be back next week with a Michigan Man Extra for you. It will be part 2 of my interview with Michigan great Dr. Billy Taylor. So until then, I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Take care, and as always, go Blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!